brother Chris from Good Enough City. I was going to try and do that for longer, but yeah, failed. Anyway, Chris from Good Enough Scenery, and in today's video, I'm going to be showing you exactly how to make this chapel right here, which is actually easier than it looks. Before we get into any of the details about any of it, I really want to first provide you with some reassurance. This is actually a lot easier than it looks, and there are a number of reasons for this, primarily because this was made more or less without measuring a single thing. It was made using one of my make without measuring templates. With these, just print them out, stick them on, carve over the foam, and you get all of the detail that you'd possibly want in a medieval building. And from there, it's more or less up to you to decide how much time and patience you have for putting in all of the other detail. I'll be honest, there's one tricky thing in this build, and that is the stained glass windows, which I decided to put in for my own purposes and own enjoyment because I wanted to push myself. And this is the thing with Good Enough Series, that you can put in as much effort with this as you choose to, but you can stop as soon as it's good enough for you. If you want to stop at the point where you just dry brushed it, that will still look really good and you can be really proud of yourself. And maybe in the next project you do, you push yourself a little bit further. But in order to make this, you don't need any special tools and you don't need to have any high-level skill. But if you can do some very basic things, then you can make this. If you can print out a bit of paper, then you'll be able to use the template. If you can cut some straight lines with a ruler and a knife on a piece of foam, you can get the shape right. If you can trace along a line with a knife, you can have all of the wonderful brick detail. You can make them all look blah, 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 blah. If you can drag a pencil along those lines, then you can add extra shape and texture to those bricks. If you're able to paint something black, you can base coat this. If you can do something like this with your hand whilst holding a brush with some paint on it, you can dry brush and make this look pretty damn good. And if you want to go a little bit ridiculous like I did, and you want the stone to look really realistic, then if you can paint a brick a different color and then repeat that maybe a few hundred times, you can do that bit. And with the roof, it's a little bit time consuming, but if you can cut out little bits of cardboard and stick them in a row, then paint them, that's the roof done. Or I'll actually even suggest a quicker method if you haven't got the patience for doing such a thing. Quick bit of honesty before we start. If you want to make this chapel exactly as presented, then you will need the chapel template, which is available over my Patreon for a whopping £3. It includes everything you need to make this without measuring a single thing. Alternatively, you can buy as a set of 5 templates for £12. So really big numbers here. Alternatively, you can go and design your own templates and just take the skills in this video and apply them to your own work. I wouldn't be bitter about that if you did that. But right, enough talking, let's start with making. And the first thing you need to do is get the template and print it out at 100%. And once you've done that, you're ready to go. So here are the printed templates. Now, there are 4 sides to the chapel, obviously. Each one has got an inside template and an outside template, which are roughly just mirrors of each other. And if you want to make just the outside, then obviously you don't have to worry about the inside ones at all. But I'm going to be making this fully playable inside, so it is important that I have both of them like I've got right here. Now, in terms of cutting it out, what I've done here is I've taken it to the corner of a big piece of 10mm foam, and then I'm just using this little kind of punch tool here just to mark out each of the different corners, which I can then just draw a line between in order to line up. Now, this is make without measuring, but you could do this by measuring this all. I've tried to do this build in the most part by not measuring much at all, but I will be going into a lot of detail about a lot of things, which is why this video is pretty lengthy. Now, to cut through the foam, nice sharp knife, and then to begin with, I'm not trying to cut all the way through. What I'm doing is marking this to make sure the shape looks right before I cut all the way through. But in general, just a few passes with the knife with not a lot of pressure and just taking advantage of the sharpness of the knife means that this will just kind of just glide through. Now, as I'm cutting in a minute, what you'll see is that as I approach a corner, I'm gradually tipping the knife so that it becomes vertical. That means that when it comes to meeting that other line, it actually kind of cuts through with a nice kind of point on it rather than having a slant kind of going through. So as I come here, it tilts all the way up to vertical, and then the piece just pops out like that. From here, you can line up the bottom of your ruler with the bottom of the chapel template and just whip that little bit of paper off. That's going to make it really easy just to line up the paper with the rest of it. From here, get your double-sided stick tape. So I just took one strip, eyeballed it to the height of the chapel, laid it down, and then what you don't see here is about 2 minutes of me fighting it in order to pull the strip off. I don't know why I find it so difficult. Now, we're going to line up that kind of corner there with the corners of the chapel. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. This feels a little bit like being patronizing at this point. Then holding the paper, see, I'm putting quite a bit of tension on there. That's what I don't want it to sag in the middle, and just want it to lie on top nice and firmly, and then pushing that down so it doesn't go anywhere. So that's got it pretty well held in place, but we want it to absolutely go nowhere, because particularly with the small details around the window, any movement in the paper is going to mean that it doesn't all line up. So you can see that I've creased the paper there, and then folding it around, wrapping it around like a badly wrapped present, and then pushing even more firmly into the crease there, just to make sure that that is really nicely taut around the front. Doing that on the other side, and then getting out the parcel tape here in order. I mean, I could have used more double-sided tape, but this felt like the right thing to do. So attaching it to one side, putting a good amount of tension on that so that making sure it's not sagging anywhere. And then once I've got the tension on that, putting the tension on the other as well, and then just joining those two sides to each other. It's not rocket science. Essentially, you're just wrapping this up. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the other side as well. Honestly, I cut this bit of tape off. It doesn't matter even slightly if it goes around to the front, because with this particular tape, it's pretty translucent. And on a number of the other templates, I actually did wrap it all the way around and have some on quite a lot on the front. And now with the corners on this one, just folding it in like you're making a paper airplane almost. And then, again, just wrapping it across, sticking it down firmly, and then that bit of paper isn't going to slip even a little bit. Don't know why I gave it the extra spin. Obviously, it felt like it needed it. Now, as I mentioned, the small windows here. Now, essentially, the smaller the detail is, the earlier you want to be doing the cutting on it. So the way in which I did this was I did the little windows first, then I went up to the round window. Then I did the strip, kind of the V strip, zigzag strip of detail before going and doing the bricks. Doing the kind of vertical part of it first, and then going into the horizontal ones, because it is a bit of paper, and the more you cut it, the less structurally sound it is going to be. So we want to make sure that the little details are getting done first. So you can see here, I'm using this tiny little blade from a company called Steady. It's very sharp, and it's very, very small blade. So, I mean, I could have been using the very tip of a scalpel. I could have been using the very tip of a Stanley knife, but this, with the size of the things I'm cutting through here are so small that I went to use this instead. And honestly, this detail kind of, it's nice to have it there, but it's not the end of the world if it's done badly, because there are going to be, particularly if you do the stained glass windows, which I'm going to be doing later on, that is going to drag way more. It's going to drag the eye way more than whether you've got some tiny bricks cut perfectly or not. And I honestly, I did this to a degree which I felt was good enough. I could have cut it out better. The details could have been seen to a bit better, but I thought, you know what, this isn't really going to matter that much. So please treat your own build in the same way. But yeah, you can see I've done the little bricks here, make sure I've done all the edges, and then I'm curving round and doing the top of the arch there, and then I'm doing the kind of the lintel part here, or the windowsill part here, and that is one window cut through. I mean, the whole front of this probably took something like 15 to 20 minutes to do all of the detail cut through, marked in, which I think compared to if you were doing this without a template, it's got to be at least half of what it would have taken if you went, you know what, I'm going to design and put the details on the chapel. Um, so with the top window there, sorry, I was talking about something else there. I did loops all the way around on both, and then punched in the brick lines. And with the main archway here, I'm doing the little more fiddly details on the, I can't remember what they're called, the things that the vassoirs stack onto the bottom of the arch first, and then around the edge of the arch. And as I was cutting along the those different pieces of the arch, just holding the paper in place, just to make sure that you're cutting in the right place. With the V detail here, obviously there's two directions. There's kind of one diagonal, like a backslash and a forward slash. So I'm doing all of the backslash or forward slashes first. No, backslashes first, and then I'm doing all of the forward slashes. And that's I don't know what it is about that, but that's actually honestly quite satisfying to do. And then I'm going around the archway here, so doing kind of the vertical part of the like the pillar thing here, doing the same on the other side. Really doesn't matter too much about the order of stuff. And then I'm going through the vertical part of the brick course. So just to make sure that you do all of this, I'm trying to kind of mostly do this one line at a time. I'm doing the left side of the thing, coming around and just looping around to make sure that all of that's done. So looping around the entire of the rose window at the top there, and then I think I go in and do it kind of just left to right, making sure the one line's finished before going from that. Yeah, I'm zigzagging left to right, right to left. Just make sure you do all the things, basically. And with all of this, you're not going very far through. You're going through the paper and you're trying to cause a cut in the foam. And if you don't do the full length of the cut, then it's okay, because you can sort that out afterwards. Now you see that I'm using a ruler just to make sure that these vertical ones go really well. So I'm cutting one side and then the other. And you can see the paper is beginning to kind of fall apart a little bit here, which is why this kind of last stage, which is kind of, a nice big stage, is easy to do, because the paper doesn't have anywhere to go, particularly because you're kind of pinning it in place and then just hiding it up by using the knife freehand. Now it will stick to the front, and you have to pick all the bits off of the tape here, which was sped up for you because it's not particularly interesting and not particularly difficult. You're just picking it off, but then you can see what the result of doing that is, and you've got all of that detail put in there. You can see all of the tiny little detail of the arches, see the bigger detail of the bricks and the zigzag and the rose window. And like I said, I think that took 15 to 20 minutes. Now you have to do exactly the same on the other side. Now I'm going to show you a couple of different ways in which you can attach these things nice and simply. So for this one, I put the strip across the back and then lined it up with it, and then just tipped it in and dropped that on that. So making sure that the paper was staying nice and flat, and I was keeping it nice and aligned with the bottom of the bit of paper as I went. And then I'm doing exactly the same wrapping process. Now, going to cutting out the windows here, there's nothing complicated about this particularly. Just using that tiny little blade again, I'm doing one side of it, flipping it over, doing the other side, just trying to make sure I'm keeping the cut nice and vertical. And then you get to the point where you can just push it through, and it eventually will give way. And then you can just pop that out, and you've got your little window cut. There'll be some little bits of tidying up to do with it, but it's by no means difficult. Now, you could, with all of the doorways, leave them closed, make a wooden door, and we will be doing a wooden door on the side door here. I decided to have the archway of this open, and what I like to do with this is this kind of bottom brick has a bit more, or slightly less width than the rest of it. So I've cut the bottom section up to the height of that first brick out, and then I'm doing the next section up. So I build this up in sections based upon how wide it is. So this next section I'm cutting here is the full width going up to the bottom of the arch. It means that you can kind of preserve detail quite well. Now, when you're doing this, you'll see your blade has a kind of a different angle. If you see there, it went vertical, and that is what you want to be doing, is having that cut be vertical, or the end of the knife be vertical, which means you are getting that in exactly the right place. so that in terms of where it is cutting in as it's going down. And you can see that I've taken that next layer out. Then I'm moving up to the brick, which is at the top of the door jamb. It has got a name. I can't remember what it is at this stage. I really don't think it's important. That brick. So cutting that one out, and then I've got a little thing I like to do with cutting out these like circles and semicircles, is to kind of do like a bike spoke type thing where I'm going from each brick and cutting directly towards the center. And so I'm going to do this all the way around. See, I've done it on the other side as well. And then you can use whichever knife you want. I'm not trying to go too deep here. It's already got a little bit of depth to it, but just kind of holding the blade pretty much still and rotating the foam is how I do it, rather than trying to move the knife around the foam, move the foam around the knife almost. Flip it over and then do exactly the same thing on the other side. And that means that you only have to cut a little way through, because there's not a lot of leeway with a knife of this size on it. But as you go through, these little kind of segments just end up kind of falling out, rather than having the whole piece had to be done as one. You've got all these pieces that kind of fall out as you go around, and it gets you to be able to see exactly where you might need to cut a little bit deeper. Whereas if the whole thing hasn't fallen off, you kind of don't really know. If you're into how this building is turning out, the phase 1 templates, including this one and 4 other ones from the set, the cottage, large stable, chapel, farm building and tavern, are now available. So if you want to build your own version of this one or any of the other ones, or start putting together a small medieval village without reinventing the wheel, then they are ready to download. They're up on my Patreon. That's patreon.com/goodenoughscenery. Right, to the build. There's a few things which were impossible to put on the template, and that's the inside detail. So I'm just using a knife here to kind of rock back and forth with a little bit of pressure, and just lining up that with the marks at the side of the archways. And you have to do this in a few places. So you have to do this on anywhere where there's like an internal part. So mostly that's going to be the archway, the inside of the round windows, the smaller windows on the other parts of it, and then the rose window itself, which I'm now cutting out. And I'm doing this in a very similar way. So I'm just building up the depth from one side and then the other with this little sharp tool here. And from there, I just didn't go for the full spoke thing, but I did just kind of cut it in half. Once again, working from one side and then the other, and getting the end of the blade kind of vertical, so we're cutting in the right position, and just again slowly just working our way around, building up the depth until it feels loose enough that we can just push it free, because we don't want to be snapping these out, we just want to be able to push them. So you see how that side just stood up nicely, and then you can see me applying some pressure on the other side there, and it's not ready to go yet. So just working around the edge until you can just pop it out like that without thinking too much. I mean, honestly, I could have done this a little bit better. I could have done it a bit neater, but it was certainly good enough. And once again, once I've done the stained glass and the detail on that, everyone is looking at that part of it rather than looking at, how well something has been cut out. Now, not going to go to a huge amount of detail on the side pieces. I want to show you yet another way you can accurately put the foam and template together. So if you fold along the bottom line like that, so you have this lip, that means that you've got something to be working to. Spend 45 minutes-ish putting 2 bits of tape on. Well, not so much getting the tape on, it's getting the backing of it off. I genuinely cut out about 3 minutes of video here. That's my cross to bear. So now you can line this up at the sides, which is simple enough, and you can line it up with the fold that you've done, and then you can just slowly drop it onto it, well, fold it down almost, kind of rolling it on that kind of corner there, and then you're doing exactly the same thing with the paper, just kind of folding it, doing the creases, folding it, getting the tape, and then just applying the tension on it to make sure it's nice and flat. And from here, I'm just going to show you quickly how I'm doing the semicircle windows, because there's quite a lot of intricate detail here. So I'm doing the kind of round arch part first, and then I'm going and cutting up the bricks, and then I was and then doing the other detail around the window frame, because again, that's the most complicated bit, and then spending quite a while just kind of picking off all the little bits. And we have a side piece which looks like that, with the doorway, which is going to be made into a wooden door. So lining up the other side of the template, another way you can do this, you can see that I'm just doing the same sort of thing, lining up the bottom of the door, and you can see how I've cut the very bottom of the template out there where the door is on the other side. And that means it's just a simple case of just lining, cut kind of 1/2 centimeter off the door, put the tape on there, once again cutting out lots of video footage. And from here it's really, really simple, because you can see on the paper and you can see the lines on the foam, both on the front, on top of it, and kind of the side that's kind of pointing me towards me. And yeah, from there it's just a case of wrapping it up once more and doing all of the detail that you might want to do. The tape tends to stick better to the paper rather than the foam, so that's why I'm taping the paper to itself almost. And there are the 4 bits with the initial template details added. From here, we need to make sure that they can slot together nicely. So this is where I recommend that you do some measuring. Even mine, when I've done quite a few things like this, weren't as good as I would like them to be in terms of the exact accuracy. So what you want to do is, on any parts that are joined together, you're going to measure in 1 centimeter from each end. So you can see I'm just putting a little mark, one towards the bottom, one towards the top, and then you need to cut out or do a line on alternate brick courses. So I'm doing like the even ones here. I think one of them I cut out that I shouldn't have cut out. I'm capable of messing things up as well. And once you've done that, and you need to do a little cut up to that kind of 1 centimeter line on every single horizontal course of bricks. And that's because you're going to cut out just a little segment like this. Just cutting out a little bit of depth, and then that can just kind of come clean like that. And then doing the same on the every other one. I don't know how else to explain it other than every other one. So this is like the second one, the 4th one, the 6th one on the side ones. And then with the front pieces that are going to join to, obviously you're going to do the opposite to that. So you would be doing the odd ones. So those 2 of those cut out. I'm going to show you that. So I'll line this up here just for an explanation. So wherever you haven't cut out on one, you do cut out on the other one. You'll see in a moment. If that doesn't make sense, which I really, really hope that it does, if that doesn't make sense, then it will in a second when you see exactly what I'll cut out, because we want them to slot in with each other, so it makes sense that which ones you cut out and don't cut out. And if you're not sure, don't cut it out yet. But there you go. That's what we're doing here. Yeah, that's just pointing at the one that I cut out, which I shouldn't have cut out. But yeah, you can see how that's going to fold in nicely together. You can see it here. So just pushing it in and kind of rotating it, and there we have a perfectly good join. So it's a case of doing those kind of alternate teeth on every single one. I would just take your time with this and make sure that like you don't cut anything until you're absolutely certain. So line it up, do one, then line it up with the next one, do that one, line it up with the next one, etc. And that's what it ends up looking when it's all together. Now for the door here, I'm leaving it in place, so I'm just widening those lines with my ruler there, and then I'm just kind of just randomly drawing some planks which would make it up. Then I'm trying to drag this wire brush across. You could use a knife for this and just take a bit more time on it, but using a wire brush is the very quickest way, and it kind of just adds this kind of random wood grain type detail, and it ends up looking like that, which is pretty decent. And then obviously you have to do the same on the other side of it as well. Now for the brick detail, this is a bit time consuming, but you can make it look so good, and it only takes a long time because there's a lot of it. All I'm doing here is just going over the lines from the template, with a pencil and just kind of rounding off the corners, and in some places I'm kind of scratching at the surface. Maybe I'm going a bit more into some detail, pushing a bit harder, flattening it out using different parts of the pencil. But you can see with this time lapse how it all kind of starts to come together and look way more like bricks that actually exist in the real world, as opposed to just lines which imitate bricks. So yeah, sometimes you're kind of flattening details out, sometimes you're just applying a bit more pressure. This foam that I use, which there's going to be a link below to buy the exact same foam, this compresses really nicely this sort of detail. You can see how I'm using the side of the pencil there to kind of round it off. And then once you've done that, you can get some ball of foam here, and you can just compress it even further, and the kind of crumpled up foam takes like it puts that texture, it impresses it upon the foam, so you get even more detail to be working with. It's really not difficult at all. You can see how quickly that's kind of come together. There's just, a number of different panels and pieces that you need to do. But I'm going to show you me doing a complete one here. So just going around the edge of the window, widening out the brick lines, and rounding off the corners. I'm not. This is something that I did with all of it. In the most part, you're doing without thinking. You just need to make sure you do every single line, but you're not really thinking, oh, I'm going to do this here, I'm going to do this here. You just kind of go, oh, that might look cool, literally as your pencil is running over it. But I think this was sped up from about, I don't know, I think it was 7 or 8 minutes, something like that, which, considering the level of detail and how kind of good it looks, really isn't that much. And once you've done all the detail with the pencil, going over it with that foil thing again, and you can see how much detail is in, and that's even before any paint's been added to kind of make that make that pop. So in terms of painting it, we're going to do a base coat in black first. So I'm mixing together some PVA glue with some kind of cheap black paint, and roughly in a 1-to-1 ratio. It's not something I measure, it's something I absolutely eyeball. And from here, we're just going to be painting it on. Now, one of the good ways of making sure you get into the details when you're doing a base coat is just to make sure that your brush itself is just a little bit wet. We don't want to be watering down the mixture too much, but you just want to put a bit of water on it before you put any paint or any of the paint glue mix on, and that just kind of pushes it into the detail a bit more. And as you're painting it, if you do end up in a situation where it doesn't feel like it's gotten to the detail, you can just put a bit of water on your brush, go over that part a couple of times, and it will kind of thin it out and make sure it gets into that lovely detail. And then you can prop them all up to dry. Once they're completely dried, then you can go and add some more detail. Now, you can just dry brush this grey and then dry brush this white. I'll put a link to a video where I've used a previous template to do exactly that. But if you want to go into a bit more detail, if you want it to look a bit more realistic, if you want it to look like mine, then you're going to need to add some more colours. Now, it might surprise you just how bright the colours I use are. And I want to be absolutely clear. I used 5 colours. You could probably get away with using 2. It's I like to go overboard in these sort of things because I want it to look as good as humanly possible to kind of inspire and just to kind of grab attention, I guess. But for me, it was worthwhile. Now, all you're going to be doing here is just painting individual bricks. So I've got some, I think this is Tau Light Ochre from Citadel, but it doesn't really matter exactly what shade particularly. It's just a case of getting lots of different colours on there, using, watered down a fair bit. Probably definitely thinner than you'd put on a miniature, and I'm not really thinking about which brick. I mean, almost trying to not think about it at all, because if you do think about it or you look, then it ends up kind of turning into a pattern, and you don't want it to look like a pattern at all. You want it to be as random as you could possibly make it, which is very, very difficult to do, because if you're trying to be random, you end up not being. Anyway, just paint random bricks. So some of these are going to be the archway ones. Some of them are going to be just like sections of the zigzag bit there, and other them are going to be the smaller parts of the tiny archway in the window. But just picking out completely random bricks, doing that doing the side ones as well, then going on to a different color. So I think that next one was Kislev Flesh or something like that, which is like more like a beigey flesh tony type color. And yeah, just avoiding a pattern wherever possible. I know this is going into one of the blues. This is Hef blue or something like that. Again, the exact ones don't actually matter. Just go crazy. And it starts to look like it might be a child's toy or something like that because of the different colors you end up using. This is one of the greens. It's not goblin green. I wish it was goblin green, but it's not. But yeah, you just completely completely crazy and color all of these different ones, all these in bricks, leaving some unpainted. Yeah, you get to the point where I'm at now, where I'm taking some of the black paint glue mix and mixing with some white. I tried this with a dry brush. It really didn't work very well like that. And it's almost good that this is kind of cheaper paint, because we don't want good coverage with this. We want to just kind of dull it all down, and that's what I'm doing. I'm going back and forth with this kind of flicky motion that you're seeing, with like not too much paint on the brush, just enough that you're kind of, that you're kind of, you can see that you're making a difference to the tones, and you can already see that looks a bit more like stone might look like, but obviously it's still a bit much. But it's going over the entire thing, and if I show you the kind of comparison here, and that's just 2 minutes, maybe not even that, of going over the different coloured bricks with this whited down black and grey, black and glue paint. Great sentence, Chris. From here, once that has completely dried, and it's important that it has completely dried, it's going to be dry brushed in white in a kind of what would be a vertically downwards direction. And it's quite a heavy dry brush to kind of pick out the detail, and once this is completed, it really starts to look like stone might. But there's still another stage after that. So when I'm bringing the brush back up, I'm not hitting the stuff. I'm generally working in a downwards direction. If the thing was vertical, as it should be, I'm working in that direction in the most part, because I want to try and kind of hit those highlights. Sometimes it's a bit like almost impossible to do that. You have to work sideways maybe, and you can't use cheap paint for this. If you use cheap paint for this, it will just feel like you're painting it. So I'm using a white as white thing, and you can now see the difference between one that's been dry brushed, that one's not quite finished with the dry brushing, and the other one. But that is what it looks like once it's done, and you could leave it like that. That's not a bad look for it. But if you want to go to just a stage further, I've got this kind of black wash. You could use something like null oil, I think, maybe, but an actual black wash, which you could make yourself as well, is just really draws all of the kind of brightness out of it, and it looks that kind of gloomy, grim, darky old stone that I want it to look like. And you can see just how good that stone looks, and looks even better with some lighting on it. Painting the door now, which obviously you want to do last, because that's you'd be trying to avoid dry brushing tiny little areas otherwise. So I've started by just basing the wood in Rhinox hide, and that looks kind of all right like that. And then going with Steel Legion drab here, and just keeping the brush relatively flat as I'm trying to do it, so that it kind of hits the higher areas. We're not dry brushing it, we're just trying to hit the higher areas of it with a kind of wettish brush, and then fairly quickly that ends up looking like wood, basically. Looks pretty decent. Certainly good enough. That's for sure. Now, on to the stained glass windows, which I had never done before. So what you're witnessing here is, my first ever attempts at this. It's important that the plastic you use is not going to stick to UV resin, and there's particular types that will stick and won't stick. So this ice cream lid, takeaway container lids and stuff like that all work pretty well. But if you're not sure, test a little bit of UV resin and see if it just pops off of it really quickly. If it does, once it's set, that's exactly what you should be using.
Now, to make the stained glass windows, this is a bit fiddly, I'm not going to lie, and it's very difficult to film because I'm trying to show you what I'm doing whilst holding a torch and putting the resin on. But you're working, you want the bit of plastic to cover the window entirely, and you then are just going to put little drips of it and setting it as it's falling, and you're trying to kind of basically seal the edge where it might leak out. Kind of pushing down on the foam at the same time to try and cause minimal leaks. But to be honest, a couple of these that I did had pretty substantial leaks, and you'll see how I fixed them in just a minute, and it's really, really not difficult at all. You wouldn't even know that it had gone horribly wrong. So yeah, just going around the edge, sealing it and setting it with the UV torch as you go around. I mean, the UV resin is pretty inexpensive. It's about, I think, £4, something like that, and the torch maybe a bit more expensive than that. But if you're going to be doing rivers, if you're going to be doing more stained glass windows, going to be doing anything like this, it's a pretty inexpensive thing, and that UV resin goes a long way, particularly if you are doing windows. Now, once you've spent a long time, and I mean a long time with a torch in it, you should just be able to peel that off. If when you start pulling it up, you can still see it's sticky or it's still pulling on it, then just put the torch on it for another couple of minutes. If you can, you just leave the torch there and walk away for 5 minutes and come back. But once you've done that, you can see the tiny leaks there where it's come out to the side, but they're not an issue. And I'll show you, like I said, I'll show you in a minute. The top of my head, apparently. Now I'll show you how I kind of sorted out the shininess issue. Now you can see as I've been talking there, I found this kind of created this rose design on ChatGPT, and it came out with that, and I just copied that painting on with a dark grey paint because my black had run out entirely until I found that I actually had another black. Cool story, Chris. But just sketching in the details very lightly and then going over the lines, just thickening them up. But yeah, there's a starting light and just going over it, and you can see what that looks like. And to paint them, I'm going to be using contrast paints. So this is Zealot Yellow from Army Painter, and just basically you can see the picture that I'm following there. So all of the outer bits had this kind of yellow go on it, and yeah, you're just trying to stay within the lines. It's not a difficult thing to do. I thought it should be watered down. It's actually better if it's not watered down, I think. And then did the petals with a red, obviously. So that was blood red from Army Painter. And then I think I used dark wood to do the center, but I think I might have gone over it with something else because it didn't look very good. But you can hold this up to the light and you can see where you haven't quite done it in places. And I just did a number of patterns that I just kind of made up. I did a sun, did this kind of pinwheel thing at the top there, and just did these kind of windows that we just had a cross in the middle of them. But yeah, it doesn't actually take particularly long. And then to sort out the shiny bits where it's leaked, got some Storm Shield, which is just basically a matte varnish which you can paint on. And anywhere where some of the stuff leaked out in any way, I just painted over it. So rather than it being this kind of shiny leak, which is kind of obvious, it just completely kills all of the reflection off of it, and it's not noticeable. One thing I've forgotten to mention, which I definitely should have mentioned, is that the foam wants to be, the window wants to be at the bottom, or the inside of the foam. So you want the inside of your bit of foam downwards when you put the resin in. That's very important. And then it's kind of set towards the back once the things have been all put together. But yeah, going around this with the Storm Shield on all of the edges and making sure that looks, you kind of get all of the shiny bits. Now on to the floor, and yes, that is a ruler, and yes, I am measuring. Kill me for saying it was made without measuring entirely. This was just cutting out thing. I could have used the template. There is a sheet in the template which shows you how big this is. It's actually simpler in this instance to just measure a bit of foam. The make without measuring thing is much more about all of the details that you put into it, not cutting out the things themselves. But yes, cut out a bit of foam which was the same size as the building footprint, and then putting marks every 3 centimeters. You could do this however you wanted to. I've not put a guide on, how to do this, because it's kind of open to your interpretation. You can make it more flagstones, you can make it more cobblestones. I decided to have it nice and simple and square. So lines every 3 centimeters, and then doing the same thing you've done with the walls, just by kind of adding some more detail, and then marking out where the door would be. That is on the template, and just cutting like half of the height off and a little bit back, so that you have a step. And this took I think 10 minutes from start to finish. It really wasn't a long thing. And from there, I then took the same black and glue mix, which that went a long way. I think that covered the entirety of the build. But yeah, just undercoating it in that like this. And from here, I went on to dry brushing. So if you didn't want to bother looking at that video showing you how to do the walls just by dry brushing, you could use this technique here. So I'm taking some cheap grey paint, and I'm taking a big sponge here and just getting off the excess. And then, because we don't want it to splodge on, we want it to sponge on. And then going over the whole thing takes literally a couple of minutes. And even if you did nothing after that, that looks pretty decent. But you can go to further detail just by taking some white paint. So this is white Scar. It's not the same one I used earlier for no apparent reason. And then just dry brushing the whole thing. Thinking about where it might be a bit more worn. So, down the center where people might have walked a bit more, and towards where the other door comes out, I did a little bit of a heavier dry brush and did kind of less towards the edges. And it comes out looking like that. Pretty simple. So for the roof, I made this out of corkboard. You could equally use just thick cardboard if you wanted to. Corkboard has a bit more weight to it. So I just cut it to the right size, and I've half cut through along the center line, and there we have our kind of peaked roof. So I'm reinforcing that a little bit later on. And from here, this is where the insanity begins. So I took just a regular cereal box and cut it into strips. I'm not measuring these. I'm eyeballing roughly a centimeter, something like that. And just cutting a lot of them, like a lot of them, such that they covered the whole thing, because that's the whole point. So I didn't count, I just cut a whole bunch of strips until I felt like it was enough. And then from there, I'm eyeballing once again, like about a centimeter again, but not trying to make and I've got like 5 or 6 of those strands in my hand right there. I'm not trying to make them all exactly the same length or something. I'm quite happy, almost willing for them to be weird shapes. Now, if you want to save yourself a lot of time but not look quite as good, then you could get the strip, and then you could draw lines with a biro, kind of making quite a strong indentation, and that would make it look like it was tiled, but it wouldn't have the kind of variety in the gaps and stuff. So the way that I've done it is for maximum impact of look, but you could just have strips that you were sticking down rather than individual tiles. Now, this is for the top bit, which later on we'll see didn't end up being used, or rather it got taken off, and I had to do another one, but I just cut a wider thing and then used the biro to kind of score halfway along, and I folded it in half. And this will form the ridge tiles. And once again, I'm not measuring this, I'm just eyeballing, I guess about an inch, but you can make these as big or small as you wanted to. And they're going to be put to the side and not used till much later on. Now, sticking these down just using PVA glue. So doing a strip about an inch wide, like you're seeing here, and then I'm using tweezers here to just pick up a thing and then work it into place. Come on, there we go. Not where I want it to go, but it looks right there. And yeah, this is the madness from here on in. Just sticking down tiles one at a time, doing the kind of shiny side of the cardboard downwards, and just making them kind of all line up with each other roughly. Not trying to do it absolutely perfectly, but trying to do it quite well. A little bit of an overhang over the end of the cork, but not too much, just maybe about a millimeter, something like that. And then you see I've kind of cut there to the next layer up, and we're doing the same thing, but we're just having that overlap by maybe 2 or 3 mil, and then just doing a bit more. So just working up along the rows, putting some more glue down and rinsing and repeating. This took a long time, but it's the sort of thing where, you know, that already looks pretty fantastic. You see I've got the ridge tiles put on top there, and you'll see them get taken off later on. But it took a long time. But you put a podcast on, put some music on, and just lose yourself in the moment. You know, it doesn't all have to be rushed along. And then I've base coated it once again in that black paint. You can see that I've already started the process of painting it here because I forgot to turn the camera on. But yeah, just some red paint. This was some Vallejo one, and using the big sponge again to get some on there, get the excess off. And we do want genuinely sponged details. We don't want it to be blobbed on, and you can see it coming together like this. So I decided that I wanted to have like terracotta type roof tiles. So having the black and then the red just sponged on really gave us that kind of base level that we wanted to work from. And from there, like if you look at terracotta tiles, they're almost like peachy type colors as they kind of get kind of dried out and blasted by the sun. So yeah, I tested the color on there, looked right, and then using the same sponge, which had at this point dried out, and the paint was obviously dried as well, getting some kind of peach colored paint, which I mixed up, and just again going over the same thing, but just that little bit lighter, not trying to get the same coverage because we don't want to lose the red underneath. And you can just see quite quickly how this all comes together and how quickly it looks good. Genuinely, I'm so pleased with how this turned out. I mean, the painting, all of the painting takes a matter of minutes, you know, excluding the drying time, and you can see. I mean, I think that just looks like a roof. Automatically, that just looks like a roof. Now, the next up with the roof tiles, you can use the thing from the template if you want to. I just use the top of the roofs for this, but they need a bit of a support to hold the bench roof in place. So I'm just basically cutting out the triangle shape at the top of the end walls. I need a couple of these, one for each end. So yeah, just cutting that, and then again, not using the template here, I'm just eyeballing about 1 centimeter wide, and this is going to form, basically going to form rafters. It's kind of something that's functional and looks good. It's much more important that it functions well rather than looks good, because once it's in the building, it gets borderline completely lost. So it's not the sort of thing you have to put a huge amount of effort in. But essentially, I've drawn a triangle 1 centimeter in from the side, and then just cut that out. And that's like your A-frame rafter type thing once it comes out. There we go. It's not incredibly strong, but it's strong enough for this purpose. And then I cut out another one, exactly the same, and we have two. From here, it's a case of making them look a bit more wooden. So once again, going back to our wire brush to add some grain detail, and just using the pencil to kind of draw a line showing where the beams might split. So at the top of the bottom part and then in the middle. And then from there, just painting them with one of the brown paints I've got. I can't remember which one it was. It doesn't really matter. The internal shots, you'll see it's so dark you can't even see the color of the brown. So I really didn't spend too long trying to make these look great. You only have to do one side of them. And this is why I had to take the ridge tiles off, because once this was bent, yeah, you can see that they kind of detached because they weren't big enough. Now we want these rafter bits to be placed so that they don't interfere with anything, and they're right at the end. So just kind of putting one right on the edge, and then drawing on the inside of it, as well as kind of showing where, just reminding yourself exactly where the midpoint is where it folds. I don't think that line was necessary, but there I am doing it anyway. And then when going to glue it with the hot glue gun. So you can see they've actually only done one edge of this, because the other edge simply is not going to get seen once it's in place. So we've measured the inside of it, and then we are moving it over so that it is going to be inside of the walls. So the position doesn't have to be exactly perfect. It just has to not interfere with the end wall. So it has to be at least 10 mil in from the edge, which I have, as you can see, marked by using the depth of these different triangle things. So yeah, putting these A-frames in place, I'm doing sticking one edge of both in first, and then I'm making sure that they're nicely positioned before then putting glue on the other side of it. This wire was incredibly annoying. Stick around for an even more annoying glue gun moment a bit later on. That was fun. Yeah, and you've got a little bit of time, and you can just literally fold that down and push it down and apply some pressure. Make sure they don't kind of wander off at any kind of weird angle, which they're unlikely to do, but just make sure that that doesn't happen. And then as an afterthought, I decided I was just going to paint the inside of it using the rest of that black paint. And this is not something you have to be neat with at all, because, you know, I ended up painting onto some of the wood and the rafters and stuff, but it's literally not going to get seen. Yeah, so going back to the top of the roof, I took off all of the things and then made a new ridge tile thing in exactly the same way, painted it in the same way, and just made it a bit bigger and had the fold in place, and then cut it into little strips, as you'll see in just a second. I just went off screen to go and get my scissors apparently. And yeah, just cutting those into rough size, and then using I think I went for wood glue with this because it sets a lot quicker. So yes, using some wood glue on the top there. Also this putting some wood glue inside of the seam where it's kind of bent, and then once that's done, just hold, like just putting those tiles in place, and then you'll see in a minute that I put it onto its back and then they were trying to detach themselves, so just using a chopping board there to hold it in place. And yeah, they stuck in place, and then we come to the kind of weathering of it, and I had to play around with this quite a lot. My hope was that when I put this kind of wash on, it was going to kind of drip down and roll down the roof like it just did there for a second, but like properly roll down. But even thinning it out quite a lot, it really didn't want to move that much. So this was very much a kind of experimentation thing for myself, where I was just kind of making it up as I go along, tipping it up there to see if I could make it happen. But again, it just, for some reason, it didn't want to flow like I wanted it to. The only thing I didn't try, which I perhaps should have done, was to add some speed paint medium or something to make these washes just flow a bit better. But well, either way, it didn't work. So I went to a contrast paint, and then from a great height, I kind of dropped it down. Again, still wasn't particularly interested in rolling down like I wanted it to, but I noticed that the color of the tiles ended up looking pretty decent with this this brown contrast paint on. So I ended up just kind of thinning it out with some water, and then actually using that to paint the entirety of the side. And thought, you know what, I'll do that, and then I'll come to the more detailed part a bit later on. But I think you can see, and you know, this is your choice in this regard. You can see how much better it looks with that on. And here, I think you can see perhaps that I'm not even painting this. I'm actually flicking the paint on, trying to encourage it to roll down, but it wasn't particularly interested in doing so, which was a bit of a shame. But I eventually just kind of just painted the lines on myself. But just experiment with different colors. I think it's difficult to get it wrong. Onto the construction of things now, and for the gluing of this, I'm using my more expensive hot glue gun. This has got a temperature setting on it, which means I can put down glue a bit more accurately, and it means you don't end up with loads of stringy mess between anything you're putting down. So just on the top of each of these teeth, I'm just putting a bit of glue and then slotting it together. It should fold together quite satisfyingly, I think. And then from there, it's a case of just moving it around and making sure that those teeth all kind of knit together nicely. If you see any like popping out, just hold it for a little bit longer, and you can kind of put it on its top like this and just push down. But yeah, just glue it and hold it for a bit. And then from there, I'm doing exactly the same thing on the other long side. So again, just folding it up like that and applying some pressure to don't put it on its side like that. That's a terrible idea because it just collapses. So yeah, you want it on the short end. That will work a lot better. And then finally, the door piece. Once again, just a little bit of glue on each tooth. And then from there, just pushing it down, and you can see how nicely it all slots together. Which it honestly it's actually really quite satisfying. You do have to work with a little bit of speed, but in the most part, it's quite a kind of satisfying experience. At this point, it's time to glue the whole thing to the base. We are approaching the end of things, and we're about to have the most inconvenient door knock in the entire world. So I'm just using the glue gun to go. I'm eyeballing a centimeter wide, and I'm just applying a bead of glue along every single edge, avoiding the doorway, obviously. And it's about at this point here that the door knocks. You can see me all of a sudden rushing and going off center and thinking, oh my god, who's that other door? I'll just go and get that. Not only that, I'll trip over the extension lead and then the glue gun will fall off the table. Great fun. Rushing back, thankfully it was only a delivery, and thankfully still had some working time. It's just a case of applying this. If you've cut this out accurately, it should be a pretty spot-on match. It shouldn't be difficult in any way, but just making sure that everything's square with all of the edges. Things can go off center slightly, so just being careful and taking your time with it, and maybe not having an inconvenient door knock and tripping over the glue gun wire. You're probably wondering what it looks like, and I'm not going to keep you waiting. Here's a series of photos showing it in some very flattering light. This is the finished chapel, and honestly, I couldn't be happier with it. It's one of my favourite things I've ever made. I put a lot of time into it, and it paid off. And that's the thing with scenery, especially with good enough scenery. You put in the amount of effort that gets you the result that you're happy with. If you want to make one of these yourself, you already know the score. The template is on Patreon, which is patreon.com/goodenoughscenery. You can grab it on its own as part of phase 1 of the medieval buildings pack, or pick up any of the other buildings individually if you fancy a different project. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. Whether you want to make this chapel, or the tavern, or the cottage, or one of the farm buildings, or something completely different using your own techniques that you've picked up from this video. Either way, I'd love to hear what you're planning. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you for another video soon.